Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. I have with me a very special guest, someone that I have known for a long time. And until I started looking up his resume and discussing with him some of his background, I had no idea where Will came from. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Will Hanley. Thanks for joining me today, Will.
Listen, it's my pleasure. Have my ex-wives been talking to you? Is that how you? No, those.
No, no. So Will is a local drummer and he comes out, everybody sees Will, everybody sees what he does. So let's get to know Will a little bit. So I did some research and I found out you are from South Weymouth. Did I say that right? South Weymouth,
South
Massachusetts?
Weymouth. South Weymouth is what we say.
Weymouth.
Yeah,
Okay. So it's not a
it's an
mouth,
old.
it's a muff.
It's exactly. There were a lot of the local places in Massachusetts that were named after similar places back in Britain from which people had come. So I'm sure
Okay.
there's a Weymouth back there. Yeah,
Okay. All right. So you're from South Weymouth, Massachusetts. So
correct.
where exactly is South Weymouth? South
It's about.
Weymouth?
You say that so beautifully. Yeah, it's about, I don't know, 20 minutes south of Boston, kind of southeast of Boston. It's probably halfway between Boston and the beginning of Cape Cod. That was
Okay,
the
so
what
so it's
was
basically
called
a suburb of Boston.
exactly South
Okay.
Shore of Boston is
Oh, okay.
called. Yeah,
Were you born and raised there?
exactly. I was born at South Shore Hospital, maybe 2 miles from the house that I grew up in there. Yeah. And back then, it was a nice local kind of small town community, with the exception of the fact that there was a naval air station right across the street from the house that I grew up in. My parents were able to afford this place. I mean, no one thought about the fact that there were all these modern aircraft taking off and landing all the time, like a mile away. But it
Uh,
was a lovely place to go. Great neighbors, great neighborhood.
Okay. Okay. So did you grow up in a musical family? I mean, or were you kind of like the first musician to get started in all of this?
No, my dad was a musician, not really ever a professional musician in that he worked at a lumber company, did music on the side, was a really fine player of lots of the older jazz. Fats Waller was his absolute favorite guy. And every now and then he'd go out and do these performances where he would get dressed up and use garters on his sleeve and bowler hat and that kind of thing and do the Fats Waller thing. But that was sort of the tradition.
So he
And
was a
oddly
piano
enough,
player.
he was a keyboard player. We had an organ in the house. We had some player pianos every now and then. I mean, there was no money really, so it was whenever anybody said, "I've got this piano I'm getting rid of. Would you like it?" He would say yes, and we'd all struggle to get it in the little house that we lived in, and that's what we grew up in, and that's what I started tinkering with at a young age. Yeah.
Okay. So why drums? What brought you to drums? Because we all nowadays we love you as a drummer and you're a great drummer, but what got you to drums in the first place?
It's a good question, Michael. There are possibly some answers I don't know. I guess it was the classic thing, right? Kind of like tapping on things all the time. My dad would play the piano and I'd always be there with pencils on the end, kind of tapping away or whatever. That was the thing. We had some neighbors that my mother probably hated and wanted to kind of drive them crazy with all the noise all the time. I don't know. That I don't know. But it was the kind of thing where company would come over and with a drum, it's like, oh, Billy, why don't you bring your drum up and play some things for the guests, whatever. Well, here's my rendition of Washington Post March, whatever. What do you do when you're a drummer, right? So there was a little bit of that, but mostly I think it was a way for me to, now that I think back on it, to fit in with people my own age. When I was in junior high school, there was a great music director there who also went to our church. So my folks got to know him. Ed Burke, just this really sweet man. He got me involved with the band situation there. And I started taking private lessons. My mother worked an extra job to kind of, put the $3 a week into this little accordion folder she had with the budget very careful. And I went into school where the guy would come once a week to teach several students at the school, at the public school. This beautiful man named Frank Shushin, who was a real gigger in Boston, in the Boston area. And it was from Frank that I eventually learned my wise guy stuff, right? Because he's a jazz drummer. They probably weren't smoking weed back then, but maybe they were. But they were just like the underground kind of guys. And every now and then, my high school would hire his band to come and play, so we get to actually see him play in the band. But they were these like cool cats, they didn't want to have anything to do with us kids. It
Right.
was just kind of, and that sort of became my template for what I kind of thought what I wanted to do. So that's what I did. I was in stage band in junior high school and became very popular because of that. We would do an arrangement of when the Saints come marching in, and there was a drum went do 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 do. So I remember one time after a school dance being lifted by the guys on their shoulders, carried around like the football hero, kind of thing. And that was kind of a great memory too. And then from there, when I went on to high school, I was involved in all the music programs there, all the bands. Marching band was great. We had a really good football team, so a really good marching band. And also involved in the choral. I loved to sing, and I had a very high voice, so got to sing all the really high tenor parts in the chorus and that kind of thing. So
Boy, you
I
did a lot
really
of
was kind of.
music in school, didn't you?
It was a great situation. It was a sort of an affluent community, even though my folks were sort of at the outskirts of it. But I benefited from being in that area because the music program was just excellent all the way
Mhm.
around. Yeah,
Okay. So
we had a
so
really
now we
good
get to talk about the next level, because this I thought was interesting. When I went looking at some of your resumes, and I'm like, wait, so something's missing here. So you went on to university and you went on to study. Now, where you kind of took a roundabout route to get to music. So tell
It's
me
true.
what you originally went to school for.
Well, I was accepted as a Spanish major. I think originally, no, I think I was accepted as a mechanical engineering major. I grew up next to a naval air station and I loved flying, which I eventually, got more serious about. But yeah, it's kind of very complex. But, I started getting involved in junior high with the junior high band and thought about majoring in music, but it just didn't seem right. I had
Okay,
gotten I gotten a scholarship from my high school to major in Spanish. I
right.
did really, really well in the way things were set up back then. In ninth, no, in 10th grade, 10th and 11th grade, you did Latin. And 11th and 12th grade, you did French. And then 12th, I guess it was 9, 10, 10 and 11, 11 and 12. First Latin, then French, and then Spanish. And I did really well in Spanish. I used to go to local competitions and do really well, el color de la bandera española, blah, 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 things like that. Just think, I'm lazy, all right? I'm really, really lazy. And so I tend to just do what comes easy for me. And that was easy. Spanish was just really, really easy for me. So I
Wait,
ended
wait,
up
wait.
getting a
So,
degree in
well, wait, wait. So I was about to say, now your degree was not linguistics; it was in Spanish.
Spanish.
Really? Okay. So when
19,
you finished now you told me that after you finished with Spanish, you were recruited by the government? Really?
I finished I went to UMass as a Spanish major in 1964 and graduated in 1968 with a bachelor's in Spanish and was pretty much recruited by a national security agency. And they offered me a good position, a good starting salary, and the chance to live in Washington, D.C. Boston was cool, but Washington, D.C.? So I had got married that summer, and my wife and I lock, stock, and barrel moved down to Washington, D.C. And we were really high as a kite. We loved it there. And I had a really good job. She had graduated with a degree in medical technology. and so got a job at a hospital right away, making way more money than me. So we were really pretty well set. And I really loved working there. And since leaving there a few years later, I've had these dreams about going back. Suddenly there was no problem. I would just walk into my old office.
Yeah.
Somehow I didn't imagine, the most secret agency in the world, right? And I
Yeah.
just sort of saunter in, looks up and goes, "Hey, how good to see you." Nobody would say like, "Hey, it's been 20 years, what are you doing back here?" So those are the dreams that I had because I loved working there, And I love the secret aspect. Like I'd go to buy a car and apply for a loan, and it would say occupation, and we were told only to say agent. That's all we were allowed to say. So because that
Yeah.
was the Met agency,
Well,
CIA down the road, FBI was, nearby or whatever. So
that's
yeah,
fine. No, I get you because as an air traffic controller, we were allowed to put down air traffic controller, but when they wanted my work phone number, I wasn't allowed to put that. I had to write classified.
absolutely. So you know what that's like.
Yes, I
It's really
do.
it's really kind of cool to think about it now. Back then, that was kind of a pain because sometimes they wanted more and you just couldn't give it to them, as you well know.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
no, I do know. So now after you finished with your degree in Spanish, where did you
Yes.
go from there? Besides, so you went to
Well,
the NSA. What
I
happened
went.
there?
Well, a lot of things happened. What you're looking for is what happened with my career. But I mean, I had been a hippie in college, but to get a job with NSA, of course, I wore suits. I had cut my hair back. I was really very slick looking for about a year. And then my daughter was born, and I decided, you know what? I'm really a hippie. If they don't like me, they can throw me out. So my hair was down all the way to my butt, basically. Back then I was wearing bell bottoms and these wild shirts and stuff. And I pretty much guarantee you I was the only agent there that did that stuff. And I expected at any moment that people from M5 would come along and say, would you come this way? Come into my office here. We have to have a talk with you. But they left me alone because I was good at what I did. I kept moving. I think I was assigned to the Peruvian. This is all declassified many, many years ago because this is like 50 years ago. But I I think I started decoding Peruvian codes. I mean, we're friends with Peruvians, so it wasn't a big deal. But gradually, I was moved up to higher and higher. There was the Yugoslav thing, which was, I think, the Soviet Union was still, going on. Then I got moved into the Soviet area because I was good. I was good at what I did. So the way I looked was sort of immaterial. And it was around that time that I had a really good office manager who liked me a lot, despite my looks, or maybe because of my looks, but got me involved in a lot of math.
Okay.
And so I started writing, and of course, computers were just coming in. There weren't very many. I think COBOL was just starting to come in, but most everything was, you know, ancient.
Mm-hmm.
Stacks of these 80 field cards, take them down to the basement, which supposedly housed the biggest computer in the world down there. Of course, I think the Russians had one equally big or whatever, maybe bigger. And of course, the thing that I'm looking at while I'm talking to you now has way, way more
Oh yeah.
capacity
Oh
than
no,
that
no, no.
computer.
I know back then. So wait a second. So here you are, you're working linguistics, you're working for the NSA, but somehow you, for some reason, you went back to school at UMass for music. Where did that left
Right.
turn come from?
There are a couple more turns before that one. One was at NSA, like I said, they really, I did. They offered to send me to get a master's in linguistics during the evening because I had a bachelor's in Spanish. And I wasn't really dealing with the Spanish then. I was breaking codes from Russia, basically. And I had taken some Russian courses in school and some German courses just because language, next to music, language is my passion. I love it.
Mhm.
Um, so I got a master's in linguistics. My wife and I were thinking about, our daughter had gotten old enough that we didn't want to bring her up in the DC area. The race riots were happening then. This is like 1970, 71, something like
Oh
that. There
geez,
were,
right in the middle of the Vietnam War.
it's true. But because I was NSA, I had a deferment and that never really materialized. Um, So I had gotten this degree, this master's degree in linguistics. UMass, my old, you know, my alma mater and Cindy's alma mater, we had met there during our undergraduate years. And here I was with a master's in linguistics. They started offering a doctoral program in linguistics. And they were like 2 hours drive from MIT, where Noam Chomsky was the big guy, really transforming linguistics from the old days of going out in the field and listening to an informant with a jug of whiskey so you could get him to say or her to say what you wanted, to like really being there with Chomsky. And also politically, Chomsky, there was a nearby Air Force base, and he would come out and we'd lock arms, blocking access to Westover Air Force Base, because we were hippies and we wanted to stop that Vietnam War. But after about a year of doing very advanced linguistics, one of my professors came over for dinner one night, because we were all colleagues, basically. My professors were people that were the first PhDs from Chomsky's program at MIT. And so, we all became really good friends. I had David Vedder, this great guy. I don't know what he's done now. Probably by now he's retired and maybe even gone. But, we were really good friends, and he was over for dinner and we were chatting. And at one point he said, "What's that music you've got in the background?" I said, "Oh, that's just some band that I'm in." He goes, "Wait, you're in a band? You're a musician?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a drummer." "Oh, well, actually, I think I was playing lead guitar in that band or something." "Yeah, I'm a musician too." He goes, "Repeat it after me." And this is where that phrase came in. He said, "Would you like fries with that?" You know, that's what you're going to get to do with a doctorate in linguistics. You're going to get a job as an assistant professor somewhere at some school, and you're going to live out your life that way. And that might be nice. You'll have a nice family and everything. But if you're a musician, so I started the program at UMass in linguistics was, of course, not far from the program in music. So I started
Ah,
kind of going there. And at the same time, a good friend of mine had opened a guitar store, very successful. And I'd go in, hang out with him. We were really good friends. He decided to buy the store next door to carry sheet music. And he asked me if I wanted to manage that side of it. And I was like, "Well, I don't know anything about sheet music or classical music or anything, but, I love you. We're good buddies. We're hippie friends. We'll play guitar. If you want me to do that, sure, I'll do it." So I started doing that and really loved it. And I loved the customers, several of whom were the faculty at the UMass music department, who decided rather than go to the bookstore there and order these books from, among thousands of other books for students going in, they just order their books and whatever music they wanted, scores for the students to study from me. So I got to know them. We got to be friends. Eventually they said, "Why don't you, I think I read through one of the books and told the guy when he came in next that I had really, really enjoyed it." He said, "Oh, you read that on your own?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, what do you think about blah, blah, blah?" And we chatted for a while. And he said, "You know what? You should come in and take some of our courses. I'd love to have you sit in on some of my courses." And I told him, I don't have any kind of background, no problem. It's a majors course, but, we can figure it out. We can, whatever. After a while, he came in and said, "You know what? You do better than our graduate students. I don't even know how, but you do way better." Because he would let me take exams too. He said, "You know what? I think you should get into our master's program." "Well, maybe I should get a second bachelor's in music." "No, no, no. You've already got an advanced degree." It was just really, I mean,
talk about
not,
serendipity.
it's serendipity. That's a good word, a not good non-religious word for what has been guiding me my whole life. I'm 76 and people are like, "No, you're lying," whatever. It's just been this really fabulous life. So I get there, I start teaching some courses as a TA. They invite me to stay on in the faculty. There was a new chair of the department. I was finishing my master's just as this new chair came in. And I remember going up, I didn't study for my orals. That's a big deal. All my colleagues were studying like crazy. And, "Hey, have you learned about this epic of music history or whatever?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'll get through okay." Because I was smoking a lot of weed and I really didn't care. I was just going to go in. All the faculty loved me. The committee to hear my orals defense was all my good friends. I walked in to take my orals, and my advisor was there standing in the hallway. And he waves me into this little room, this empty room, and he's looking around like this, talking to me like this. Listen, I want you to go in there and do what you do. And I'm like, Horace, what's going on? And this guy was the guy that the Smithsonian hired to do the gospel section. I mean, he was a serious gospel music expert, but we became really, really good friends. He's looking around like this, going, just go in there and do what you do. And I'm like, what's going on? So I look down the hall. At the end of the hall is the office, the music department office, and people are scrambling. The new chair had gone down and insisted on looking at the files, the records of the students he had just failed in their orals. And he was after the theory teacher, the history teacher. You gave them A's? They don't know anything. Horace didn't want to tell me that. I found out later. He just said, just go in and do what you do. Couldn't even look me in the eye. So I go in. The guy goes, this is your chair. I sit there, and it's all the heads of all the departments, the head of music history, the head of music theory, and my master's was in music theory. So the music theory guy was really important. So the new chair is there. He introduces himself. My name is Charles Besser. I'm the new chair of the department. Nice to meet you, Mr. Hanley. We've set this score in front of you. We'd like you to take a look at it and tell us anything you could about it. Okay. Well, I can tell that it's a 14th century mass. Wow, that's pretty impressive. Because remember, this guy had just failed all these people. For me to walk in and just say, I think it's a 14th century mass. So then, because I'm me, this fucking bullshit artist, I high as a kite. I'm like, the guy says, well, that's pretty impressive. Anything else you can tell us? Maybe the composer or the style or maybe even the piece itself. And I'm like, well, I pretend to kind of well, actually, this is a plagal cadence in A minor here, and I went to the piano and kind of demonstrated that kind of thing because I'm a show off, as anybody out there watching this knows. And so he's like, anything else you can tell us about this piece? Well, it's clear that it's a 14th century mass. Very good. Do you have any idea who the composer is? It's Palestrina. The guy falls back in his chair like, wow, how do you know that? Do you know what the piece is? I said, it's Misa de la Nostra Dama. He's just about ready to have a heart attack. He's like, how could you possibly know that? And I said, well, look, relax, just chill for a minute. I sold you this book. They taped over the title of the book and the composer and stuff, but it's like, I sold you this book. I work at the guitar workshop. That's what I do. I sell these books. He just caved. And I knew that from it was going to be easy. And so they asked me, they went through the thing. The theory guy, who was a really good friend of mine because I was his TA, he would go through, some pro forma kind of questions, and I would answer them fine. Oh, yeah, this is plagal cadence, blah, blah, blah. The history woman was like, could you trace the history of the sonata form? Well, sure. I started with the Sonata da Chiesa and then worked its way up to the Sonata da Camera. Bullshit. Just bullshit. Whatever. Pulling shit out of my ass, whatever. Go to the percussion guy. Well, he and I had played gigs together at Marlboro, some pretty big deal gigs. So we were kind of like colleagues, and he would just ask these pro forma questions. So that was it. Would you leave? Thank you. That was great. Would you, leave? So I didn't know till later that I had passed.
So wait a second. So wait. So let me see if I get this straight, because I want to make sure I understand this. Out of high school, you went to school, you majored in Spanish, you get hired by the NSA, you go back to school and get a master's in linguistics, and then you bullshit your way into getting a master's degree in music. Did I get this right?
Oh, you did. And I'm really offended at the way you just put that, young man. I mean, really,
I'm not trying.
That's why
I'm not trying to be mean. I just think it's hysterical because.
Dude,
so wait, so
fabulous.
So now you get hired. Let's finish this, because now you're hired as a music theory teacher at UMass Amherst. So
I got called. I got called that evening by the new chair saying, "Hey, we'd like you to teach this fundamentals course for non-majors. Does that interest you?" Sure. He said, "I can just offer you basically like a double TA," and I'm like, "Well, that would be great." And that became an assistant professor, became an associate professor. Dude, I don't know. I mean, it's
Where did
magical.
you, so how long did you, so UMass Amherst Amherst College is in Massachusetts. How far from Boston is that?
That's about a 2-hour drive west.
Okay, west. Okay.
There were 5 colleges there. It was a 5 college community. I went and taught at some of the other colleges: Mount Holyoke, Smith, Amherst College, and Hampshire College. This new college that was a little bit like Hunter in New York. It's, design your own program kind of thing. But,
Okay.
we all shared, there was a 5 college faculty, and we did that kind of thing. Yeah. It's out in the western part of the state, which was really just a nothing place except for all the schools, you
Right.
know?
So now you're teaching at UMass Amherst. So
Yeah.
so how long did you teach at UMass Amherst? Teach music at UMass Amherst?
It was about 25 years. It started with me one section of this Music 110, this fundamentals for non-majors. But I ended up, it became 2 and then 3. And then, I had a really good friend in one of the music theory teachers that I had sold books to back in the day. And so he kind of helped push me through to teaching the major courses. So I started doing that, and yeah, and just bullshitting my way, like I didn't know these pieces, but I was an player. I was playing in the Vermont Symphony. That's when I started there in maybe the late 70s or early 80s.
Okay,
And at
so
the same
you
time, that I was invited to teach at Dartmouth College. So I would arrange my stuff at UMass Monday, Wednesday, and Friday and go up and teach Dartmouth College. Most of the time, I left UMass in 2002, and I think I taught at Dartmouth up until the late 90s or something like that. And it was pretty cool.
wait. You have your dates backwards because so
Oh,
you said you taught it at UMass until 2002, and you taught at
yes,
Dartmouth from when to when?
basically 78 to 96.
Oh my God. So you were teaching at UMass and Dartmouth at the same time. You were gigging as a musician and you were the principal timpanist for the Vermont Symphony. Is that correct?
Right, that's correct. And here's what you might be missing. In the meantime, I'd gotten a private pilot's license and would delight in having an excuse to fly up to Hanover, New Hampshire, which had a great airport nearby. And I was also teaching part-time at a community college in Keene, New Hampshire. And so
What
I
were
would
you
fly up to
teaching there? Music?
percussion. So I know now, to me, it was just what I did. But now that we're talking about it, it's like, whoa. But I'd get up in the morning, get to the airport in Northampton, fly up to Keene, teach there was, back in those days, there was always a car at an airport with keys in it. And anybody was welcome to just drive wherever they wanted to and just bring it back, put some gas in, whatever. So I would drive over to Keene, teach my students, hurry back to the airport, fly up to Hanover, New Hampshire, or I think it was technically in Vermont. I think it was in White River, Vermont, whatever, but fly up there. But yeah, I mean, I was excited. I mean, I was just really enthusiastic about what I did. I was just so grateful too. I think gratitude, yeah, again, not anything to do with religion or whatever, but the force is that's out there has just really kind of guided me a lot.
So I am so amazed, Will. So here I like I said, I learned so much about you. And we talked about this the other day. The stuff that you've done, I mean, and musically wise, besides all this classical stuff, tell me some of the music that you were playing. You said you were a working musician. You played guitar, you played drums. I'm sure you played other instruments. I know you played piano. So you were gigging during all of this at the same time, weren't you?
It's true, but there was a time like the classical thing came out of nowhere. Really, I was sort of a dope smoking rock and roll drummer for a while. I mean, and not even a good one. I don't think I was really that good. I played in a band called Clean Living, which was a really big deal. We were kind of a country folk band, started around the same time as the Eagles. Playboy did a thing, an article, a pretty extensive article on that kind of thing. And they compared us to the Eagles and they compared us favorably to the Eagles because they thought the
Really?
vocals sounded like Alvin and the Chipmunks. Shout out to Norman Shell and Tim Griffin and Jeff Potter, my old homies from that band back in the day.
Oh,
Yeah.
so when did you start to play jazz? I know you played jazz, but when did you start to get into jazz?
My dad tried to get me to appreciate it. He'd bring me home Max Roach records, and Max ended up on the faculty at UMass. I mean, we had Reggie Workman, we had a huge faculty. We had just all these amazing, amazing guys. Yusuf Lateef was my really, really dear brother. And, much as we loved each other, he respected that I was a classical guy. And Max would come, and when I knew he was coming, I would always dress really nicely because Max was a real dresser. And he'd be like, hey, man, you're looking pretty sharp. You still running? That kind of thing. And he'd always just look amazing. And he'd say, hey, come on downstairs. I want to show you something. And it would be something that the jazz drummers did back in the day. Now, what guy wouldn't jump at the chance to kind of imitate that stuff? Me, because I just could not stand jazz.
So jazz wasn't your thing, classical was your thing. You were a teacher. So here you are in the middle of all of this. Now I get to ask the big question. What brought you to New Mexico and why?
Well, I had gotten married another time to a woman who wanted to get out of the cold, and she was this tiny little thing, and the cold just got to her. She had an uncle that lived in Southern California, and she said, you know what, let's just go visit him, see what we think about that. Before we got to go visit, they had moved to Bend, Oregon.
Okay.
And I said, heard about great things. Tell Uncle Gordon, that we're going to come visit him there. And he told her, well, we'd love to have you, but don't come until late April because of the black ice. So poor Barbara was like, no, black ice, no. So maybe we should look for some other places. So we started this 10-day journey. We flew out to Las Vegas, Nevada, and spent the night there. And then we kind of made our way eastward. And we stopped in all the places in Arizona, and we are just like, it just doesn't feel right. We drove, I-40 east, and we got onto 10 north, and we drove right by Albuquerque up to Santa Fe. And we spent 3 days up there looking around Angel Fire and all those places. We're like, shit, we've got to fly back tomorrow. What are we going to do? What a waste. At that moment, here's serendipity again, or whatever you want to call it. Douglas Cardwell, I got a call from Douglas Cardwell, who I had found was the timpanist in the New Mexico Symphony. And since when we become like best friends. And you'll know why when I tell you this next thing. He calls me the day we're supposed to fly back and said, I just got back from Spoleto in Europe. I have been unable to communicate with you. Are you still in Albuquerque? And I said, yeah, for another few hours. He said, where are you now? Well, we're having lunch in Old Town. What's the name of the place? I think it's called Julia's. I'll be right there. So he shows up, and the rest is history. He takes me back to his studio. We play timpani together for a while. We're laughing our asses off. We're totally in love with each other. Barbara too. Barbara's thinking this is my place too, because Douglas has told her, my girlfriend Dodie loves to shop. She knows all the best shoe shopping places around. You're going to be delighted here. So just before we flew back to Massachusetts, we knew that we would end up here.
Nice.
So we did.
So what year was that Douglas Cardwell, who is an amazing percussionist, drummer, and timpanist here in town, when was that?
That visit was 2003. No, 2004. It just felt home. It's
Really?
neighborhood. Just, well, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh,
It's the
I
best.
do.
And
I understand completely. So here's home. 2004, you guys decide to come here. Now, you were hired on as the principal timpanist and no, you were not the principal. You were a timpanist and percussionist for the New Mexico Symphony Orchestra until its demise in 2012, right?
that's right.
Okay, so here you are, you're playing in the New Mexico Symphony, and then you were also working for the Santa Fe Opera, weren't you?
I got it was such a blessing. I mean, again, over and over and over again. And again, blessing, I don't know what that means. I'm not religious, but just really taken care of in some, a significant way. Um, I got a call from the timpanist there who uh, he had to go back. He was also a great conductor. He got called to play at, I think it was Tanglewood. There was a contemporary music festival, an Elliott Carter Festival. That name won't mean anything to the non-classical people, but he got called to conduct a very special, very esoteric kind of concert situation back in Western Massachusetts, ironically enough. So he called me and he said, "Look, man, I need you to cover for me at the opera." And I'm like, "Oh, is it like Falstaff or something I've played 100 times?" He said, "No, it's a premiere." And I'm like, "Oh, it's this woman from Finland, this composer from Finland, and it's a 4-hour opera." So he said, and so my good friend Jeff Cornelius, who I was playing with in the New Mexico Symphony, also was playing in the opera, and he said, and this guy said, "I'll send the part down with Jeff." So I get the part the next day, and it's like an inch thick, just the timpani part. And I'm like, "Dude, what the heck?" And so I looked through it the best I could. He talked me through a couple of sections. Yeah, I show up, and there's this little tiny Peruvian conductor. And as soon as I get there, I haven't even got the drums uncovered yet. And he comes striding over, and he said, "I'm worried about this one section." And I even without uncovering the drums, he starts conducting in the air, and I just play along on top of these uncovered drums. They're not tuned or anything. And so he goes, "Thank you," and strides back to the podium, whatever. And so, I did that because I used to do that in New York. I mean, I used to do, when you play in the bigger markets, this sounds like boasting too, like all this other stuff. It's not, it's just genuine, I don't know, just gratefulness about all the stuff that's happened. It's something like this is nothing, but, anyway, yeah, it was just really weird. But, and honestly now, Michael, my good friend, I have to admit to you, I can't remember how I did that. I try to remember how I would do stuff like that, or stuff at here, with the symphony here, or with other kinds of things here. I have no idea,
You
no
know
idea,
what?
because
Muscle memory
the
comes in
classical,
and brains.
I guess, but then it goes away because I look back on that stuff and I think, how did I ever do that? And this is another weird thing. I got called to play this gig last summer for a birthday party, and it turned out to be the birthday party of Don Robertson, the guy that runs the violin store in town, of course, which
Okay.
every orchestra music
Yeah.
knows. And our
Robinson's
music,
violins.
yeah, our symphony music was left there because most of the players had to go there to pick it up. So I go there and pick it up. So I played this party. I don't know who it's for, whatever, but it turns out to be for Don's 80th birthday. They hired this sort of jazz pop blues band to play, and I'm playing in it. And here are all my friends from the symphony that I haven't seen in like 12 years. This
Ah,
woman comes up and gives me a big hug and whispers, "Nicole," in my ear. "Nicole, if you're watching, I love you, dear." She was the woman, Nicole Maniaci, the woman that hired me for all the symphony stuff. And I remembered her. I hadn't seen her in 12 years, whatever. It turns out they want the pop stuff for after dinner, but during dinner, they have a string quartet there. And who's playing first violin? It's Guillermo Figueroa, the former conductor of the New Mexico Symphony. And we hadn't seen each other in a while. What are the chances that I would get called for that seat? That's an Albuquerque thing of 6 degrees of separation.
yeah.
Bullshit. It might be 2.
Serendipity. It's all serendipity. It's all works itself out. I want to recap this. So here you are. I've said it before. you went to school for Spanish, you get hired by the NSA, you go into college to get your linguistics master's, you get that, then you go back to UMass and you get a degree in music, and you then start playing and teaching. I gotta admit, I had no idea that you had this background. And this is like,
Well,
I was so shocked. That's why I'm like, oh my God, really? So I
please.
want to thank Will for joining me today. I appreciate you joining me. It's been so much fun learning about you. I look forward to gigging with you more and more in the future. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.